Welcome to episode number 8 of No Traps, No Glory. This is the first podcast of 2019, so Happy New Year to all of our viewers. Forgive my voice if it gets a little scratchy or so. I was a little under the weather the past week, as most people know, so I'll just do my best as I can. But being the first podcast of 2019, nothing better than to go into it in terms of discussing moving into the new year. Now, obviously, it's merely more just a sociological created marker of advancing from, let's say, one year to the next, but really nothing changes. We just roll and continue going as we are, and that's how training is. But for the most part, everyone utilizes this time to establish new goals for themselves, precedents, desires, wants, and things to achieve as they go in. So new year, you have somewhat of a fresh start, which is a good thing because that allows a better mental disposition. You could push off some bad luck or bad things that may have happened, should they have happened, or be able to look to it towards a new beginning, if you will. And with that, we've had our previous podcast where we discussed goals, and I'd like to kind of segue off of that or use that as a platform a little bit to discuss not necessarily achieving those goals, but what may hold people back from achieving those goals. And biggest thing that comes with is let's say, I'd say either trepidation, but more so fear. And fear seems to be common, especially in this sport. And I personally believe it's irrational. I mean, obviously we all have fears, but you have to first determine and assess what your fears are, where they're applied, and how they are holding you back. And again, like as Franklin Roosevelt had said once, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And that's because it's a contrived limiter that only you place upon yourself. There are certain people who have no fear. Like, let's say most people should know the name Travis Pastrana. He raced motocross years ago. He's a national champion in that, but also now he does a lot of the freestyling and stunt type of stuff on dirt bikes. And as many have referred to him, the fact that he has no fear. The guy will literally do anything. And he's actually a big proponent, and as I've heard a few times him discussing how that he tries to push people and his friends past what they think their limitations are. And the key word in that is the word think. People think that they're limited, or let's say in the weight room, a certain number, when it gets into their head, make one weight very easy, then they go up at a normal progression of a jump, and all of a sudden, oh my God, this is so different. And the fear sets in. But why? Why does it set in? It's really, there's no reason that it should be. It's only a small increase, while at the same time, if you're proficient with your technique and you're very strong and confident, there's no reason that there should be a change. But oftentimes this does happen. So I'd like to discuss a little bit further where fear comes from and why people have it and why they shouldn't have it, for that matter. So let us get a little bit further. All right, so where does fear come from? Personally, I'm not sure. Everyone has their own reason, their own points to where it's contrived in their mind and then manifests. Let's say something that I would see or would argue is a little bit more rational and realistic is if someone has had an injury and they associate that with either a certain weight or certain activity. That's something that I think is a little bit more founded because there's an association. There's an association with a bad event that happened to that. So with that, there's an established fear because obviously you don't want to relive being injured or you don't want to relive some sort of bad event. But for the most part, and especially in weightlifting, because weightlifting, the likelihood of something bad happening to you is very minimal. You have to try really hard to hurt yourself. And even then, the likelihood of doing so is small. So why do people have fear, especially when they're capable? So just to go into a little bit more on that, I've told my athletes many times, especially at competitions or so, or even in training, that I'm never going to give them something that they're not capable of doing. If someone, let's say they go to squat 90 kilos, they make that nice 100 kilos, let's say 100 kilos is their best, I'm not going to make them go up to 115 just for the sake of doing it and make a large jump when they're not capable of doing it. Everything's going to be within the realm of their ability and possibility. So that being said, and going into knowing that, why do people still have these fears that are intrinsic within? And I think that ultimately comes with doubting yourself. And that's something that you have to learn to overcome. To be successful as a lifter, you can't doubt yourself. And you have to, I think, strategize on how you can prevent yourself from doing so. And so going with that and how to strategize, I think that's something that takes time to develop, but you develop that over the course of time by employing, let's say, a strategy that you may have to develop a constant positive thought process to help you achieve such. That sounded a little wordy, but it might have been, but I hope you get what I mean with that. But to elaborate now on what I mean by that is you have to think of the things that you do well and focus on what you do well to allow yourself to distract yourself from any negative thoughts and remove and avoid the possibility of negative thoughts. So let's say if you're going to go for your snatch record, you're looking to snatch 120. You could do 110 very easily. You could do 115 pretty well. Even do 118 real nicely. But then you put 120 on, all of a sudden, the wheels come off. And it's, let's say, the fear and the trepidation of that number, because either it's a designated number or something that you've established in your head to where it's a marker larger than yourself, let's just say. Now, how would you approach that, and how would I advise someone to approach that? Is first off, just by trusting your technique. If you have good technique, trust the motion and trust what you have to do to process yourself in order to manifest success. So just because it doesn't matter what the weight is on the bar, if you're not moving your body correctly, the likelihood of you having success is minimal. But if you force yourself to move your body as it needs to, regardless of how it feels, regardless of the weight on the bar, you're going to put yourself in a better position to have success. So all the time, again, I encourage all listeners, is that in all of your lifting, your basic technique and angles are what make for good technique. So what you have to do when you lift is focus on the technique without any consideration to what's on the bar. And that is going to help establish, foremost, a better thought process, but also keep you from getting so mental and being like, oh my God, this is my record weight, and then just getting all lunatic with it. So that's one of the first strategies that I'll suggest to everybody. Okay, so that's one strategy. So, and I think over time it's going to help develop knowing how to control yourself. So let's say if you're having a difficult training session, and as you're going through the motions, you're going through certain exercise. Sorry, my co-host is a little disruptive here. Otto's here for everybody who's curious. So let's say you're having a tough day, you're getting frustrated, you're having some difficulties with a certain lift. Having that strategic thought process will allow you to reorient yourself to say, okay, I know what I have to focus on, that what works to allow myself to be successful, and rein in your thoughts from going out of control and saying, oh, I don't feel well, whatever it may be that's throwing you off and causing issues. And again, that long-term will lead to success. Now, with that one will, it'll allow you to get a good thought process, but eventually there's going to come to the point where no matter what, you're going to hit a wall of fear. And the fear is going to limit you. It's going to change your technique. You're not going to trust yourself. But what you have to do at that point, and this is the hard part for a lot of people, is that you have to learn and figure out a way for yourself to be able to just smash through it. You have to learn to be uncomfortable and say, I don't trust this, I don't trust myself, but do it anyway. So let's say, as an example, when I used to race motocross, and I've told people this a few times before, is that for beginners, let's say if it's a nice day in the spring, the ground is like topsoil, it's really beautiful, black dirt, tracks groom nicely. What tends to happen, especially if you have a lot of riders, is that what develop are called ruts. So everyone knows what a rut is, but on a motocross track, it's just all the little channels in the most popular, most popular path that everyone follows. So sometimes you can have it where maybe there are 2 or 3. Other times the entire track just looks like trenches going through. And for beginner riders, when they get into a rut, the first thing that your brain tells you to do, because it's a little uncomfortable to be in and you actually lose the free control of the bike, is your brain tells you to, quick, panic, put your feet out, hit the brakes. But that's actually the worst thing you can do, because it throws your momentum off. You lose the angle of the line, because usually the lines have angles to them, and that's going to cause you to upright or lose the momentum that you need to be able to go smoothly through. More advanced riders, from their experience, even though your brain's telling you hit the brakes, you learn to smash through that and do what you need to do, even though it's opposite to what your mind does. You have to hold it wide open, give it as much gas as possible, even though it may be as uncomfortable as could be. And you learn quickly, and especially after the first time you do it, is that, oh wow, that worked great. You sail through the line, you're just on a rail, and the bike just rides itself through without you having to do much. And for lifting, it's the same thing. Sometimes you just have to learn that it's going to be horribly uncomfortable. You don't trust yourself. You don't know how it's going to work out. But when you ram yourself through and just commit to doing it, you end up achieving. And the biggest thing in lifting is about achieving. Learning how to smash through that's something that you just have to really force yourself to do. And that brings into a good point, which is another component to all this, is your emotions, i.e. anger. I personally feel that anger is the greatest emotion. Of all the emotions you could have, anger, I think, is the most productive, and this goes for life, not even just weightlifting. Anger is the most productive emotion that you could have because outside, let's say, just a blind rage, if you're just an angry person, or not an angry person, I'm sorry, they're angry people, but if you have an anger in you, out of frustration, out of either difficulties, whatever it may be, some situation that creates that, it lights a fire within you and you become the most productive. Your thoughts become the most clear, you have the most drive, and the most successful time will be when you are absolutely the most angry. And I mean, I'm sure everyone can relate, and I know I have a lot of lifters that relate, is that when they finally get to that point where they just get angry and fed up, they smash through barriers, they smash through any limitations that they may have instilled in their own mind because you finally had enough and say, you know what, I'm done with this, I'm through with it. And I'm sure everyone can think and relate to how many other instances in your life where you finally got angry enough and fed up to where you allowed that to dictate and change a circumstance, a situation in your life, and then afterwards you realize, wow, it's so much better now. So anger, you have to learn how to make it a very useful and productive emotion. So then that way you can harness the most out of yourself. So I know all the time, Mark always tells us you have to lift angry, you have to get pissed off in order to make good lifts. And it's true, because when you're happy, you're content. And when you're content, you're complacent. And when you're complacent, you're not making progress. And ultimately in weightlifting and everything in life, you have to have something within you, something innately that's driving you. And that is going to limit the amount of fear that you have overall. If you have something driving you underneath, it's going to push you to work harder, it's going to push you to not limit yourself, it's going to push you to prevent any fears, because the motivation and the passion that you have is going to really, the fear is not going to stand up to those elements. And if those elements are strong enough, fear is not an issue. So it's learning and seeing how bad you want something, what you could do to create something, and that will prevent any sort of fear. Fear obviously will pop up along the way at some point, but say that depends on the day and depends on what you're doing. But it's very difficult to let's say, manifest anger without having something underlying to it, but it's a great emotion and a great tool. So it's been something. I remember when I first started lifting with Mark, where he'd always, I say, I was too happy, and actually a nickname of mine is Joe Evil, which is just a play off of the word jovial, because one of my training partners at the time said I was just a jovial person. And I remember Mark always saying, especially in the beginning days, you have to get angry, you have to get fired up, and I had no idea how to do that. I thought I'd lift better just being happy and enjoying myself, but he's right in the sense to where the more fired up you get, the angrier you get, something that produces that emotion out of you and elicits that, you don't have any limitations, because at that point you're willing to do more and sacrifice more in order to be able to achieve what you're looking to achieve and prevent you from being held back. Okay, so to draw on another motocross related example from when I would race, let's say a lot of times you come up on the track, there's a jump. Usually every track has its signature big jump, something that if a lot of more advanced riders will tackle, new riders will shy away from, and intermediate riders will dabble with and try to test their mettle and see if they could push through it. So a lot of times it can be very intimidating. You ride up to it, you go into it a few times, you back off, you just go halfway through, you ride up to it, you feel it out, you see where you are, but when you're feeling it out, you're not committing to it. You're getting an idea, but you're not working your way through, you're not going exactly into committing fully to achieving this. Then finally you get to the point where you have enough confidence where you're like, you know what, I know I can make this. I'm going to do it. And you commit to doing it. And then all of a sudden you hit the jump, you land it, you might even overshoot it because it's always better to give it a little extra than not enough. So you overshoot it, or you make the jump and you realize afterwards, like, oh my God, that was so easy. I can't believe I was intimidated by it. So we're often intimidated, and fear is created by large objects, large obstacles in front of us in life. And that's where, to accomplish that and to limit the fear, obviously anger is a big thing. And again, to clear the jump, you finally got to be like, oh my God, I'm so sick of just jumping halfway on this stupid thing. Let me just do it. If I crash and burn, I crash and burn. But you're angry enough to the point where you're not going to let the fear limit you. And then once you do it, you realize it's very easy. So that goes into realizing that, you know what, nothing is bigger than it seems. If something's within your reach, within your ability, and you have a fair bit of confidence to do so, you should never allow that fear to dictate and limit what you're doing. If there's something that's beyond your ability or beyond your ability for a day, that will happen. But if you're willing to go after it, willing to try it, you're going to realize that you're capable of a lot more, and the fear you're not going to have. So let's say for me lifting now, I don't think personally, I mean, I'm sure I still do have certain fears, certain limitations, certain days where the bar's not moving right, but I can't think of a time when, in recent times, where I've picked something up and just been, no, and just allowed myself to mentally get it. I mean, there have been many times where I'll just literally sacrifice myself to try to make a weight. I mean, many times where it's snatching, the bar's landed on the backside of my head and got mauled into the floor in an ugly fashion, attempting the weight. But I still went after it, and especially in this sport. Motocross is one thing. You can take a chance on something and realize, and you can make a big error taking a chance, and you have to pay for it hard if you end up going down. With weightlifting, the likelihood of injury, likelihood of something bad happening to you, is very, very minimal in relation to other sports. So you can take these chances and you can push through. So it's overall something, eliminating fear and learning how to adapt and adapt to facing adversity and having fears is something that takes experience. But if you can learn how to do it in the weight room, you learn how to push yourself past and develop strategies and use your emotions, you'll be able to overcome it. And furthermore, that will end up leading into other aspects of your life. When you realize and you build up that little bit of confidence, a little bit of self-esteem, that will go much further to every other avenue. You realize, okay, you know what, I know how to do this. It's just a matter of learning the puzzle, how the pieces fit, and then how you can make yourself maneuver and navigate through those different pieces. So, again, as I've said, weightlifting is a microcosm for the outside world. What you do on the platform, how you conduct yourself in here, is exactly how you are in the world. And if you develop the strategies here, you learn how to adapt and overcome and prevent fear from being something that you create on your own, your achievement in the weight room will be much greater, and your achievement in the world will be much greater. So again, weightlifting is just ultimately the answer to everything in life. So I encourage everybody to get into the gym, get onto the platform. Hopefully this has been informative, a little bit of understanding of my philosophy on the matter, and hopefully everyone will be prospering in 2019. So thank you everybody for listening, and looking forward to episode number 9. See you guys soon.